Welcome to our Sakai demo video on building a content structure in the Lessons tool using collapsible sections and subpages. There are lots of different ways to structure your course in the Lessons tool, and we'll cover multiple ways in different videos. But in this video, I'm going to build a set of collapsible sections, one for each week of a class. Each collapsible section will have a subpage for learning objectives, readings, lectures, and individual and group activities. First, I'm going to go ahead and add the Lessons tool to my site. I'm going to go into Site Info. And in Site Info, I'm going to click on Manage Tools. Now in the Manage Tools list, I'm going to scroll down to L, where the Lessons tool is, and I'm going to check it. Now, two things I want to note here. One is that the name of the tool, what appears in the left-hand navigation, does not have to be Lessons. So if you don't use the term lesson, if you use units or modules or anything else, you don't have to stick with Lessons. We're going to go ahead and use the term Course Materials. It's a good catch-all for whatever kind of content you're putting into this button. The other thing to note is that I can add more than one Lessons tool at a time. So if you only need one button for course materials where everything's going to be located, that's all you need to worry about. But you can add multiple buttons if you have the need for other content areas separate from your main course materials. And now to go ahead and make the button appear in my site, I'm going to click Finish. Now by default, when you add a new button to your site, it shows up at the very bottom of the site. We want this to be higher up because it's a pretty important button. So I'm going to go into Tool Order, this is also in Site Info, and I'm going to find Course Materials, and I'm going to drag it up to the very top of the list, just under Announcements. Now that Course Materials is higher up on our list, I'm going to go ahead and enter the button. Now if you haven't ever used the Lessons tool before, this is the interface that you see whenever you're on a blank page in Lessons. You'll see some getting started information that gives you some tips for how to add content, and you'll have your standard tools for working with the Lessons tool interface along the top. Now since this is a blank page, one of the quirks of the Lessons tool is that you can't start adding sections to the page. It has to have at least one piece of content on it to add sections. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a series of collapsible sections, and then we're going to build some subpages. So to get started, I'm first just going to add a piece of content. And what I'm going to do is add a title to this page. You don't necessarily need a title, but sometimes it's nice to have a title, maybe the title of your course appear at the top. So I'm just going to go ahead and say title of my course here. And I'm going to go ahead and make that a header so it appears a little larger. And you'll see that this interface right here is just our interface for adding text to the page of the Lessons tool. This can be a title text, it can be body text, it can be bullet points, but this is a way for you to add text that's going to appear directly on the page to your students. And now that we have the title, now you can see we've got a few other options on the page. The starting tips go away, we've got some content in there, and now we've got some plus buttons that we can work with along the side. And this is what we're going to use to add our collapsible sections. So I'm going to use the bottom plus, and I'm going to say add section break above. And you'll see by the little outline in black that I have a new section. Now what I'm going to do, since I want one of these sections to be for each of my weekly class materials, is I'm going to go into the Column Properties button. I'm going to go ahead and give this a section title, and I'm going to say Week 1. And I'm going to say make this collapsible. Now when you get done building all of your sections, you'll probably want to go in and have them start closed. While you're actually adding content to the sections though, it's usually easiest to leave them open by default. It makes it easier to work with them. You don't have to keep on opening them up all the time. So I'm not going to check that quite yet. And now you'll see that I have a Week 1, and if I click on it, you'll see the little section where the Week 1 content appears and disappears. And now I'm going to go ahead and add Week 2. And again, I'm clicking the plus that appears at the very bottom of the screen and adding a new section break. Then I'm going into the Column Properties, and I'm saying Week 2 and collapsible, and save. And let me just go ahead and add one more. So I'm going to go ahead and build my third collapsible section. And just to mention, if I try to make it collapsible before I put in a section title, it's not going to let me. The section title is key because you need to have something that you can click on to expand and collapse. Without that, it really doesn't work the way you'll want it to. So I'm going to go ahead and say Week 3. Now if I had titles for each of my weeks, I could add titles here. Or if I had dates for each of the weeks, I could add dates. You could really put anything into this section title that that you want. I'm just going to go with week 3, make it collapsible, and click Save. Now that I've got 3 weeks, I could go through and I could build out, all of my weeks if I wanted to, and build 15 weeks and just go straight down the page. But I'm going to go ahead and start building in some subpages. So the idea is that each of these weeks is going to have a set of subpages that take students to the content in that week. I'm going to have one subpage for each different section of my content for that week, and I'm going to use consistent sections because each week I'm going to have learning objectives, readings, lectures, and then either an individual or a group activity. So to start doing that, I'm going to go ahead and in week 1, so you can see visually where week 1 is, I'm going to click the plus button right here. And we're adding subpages, and subpages are basically just new pages in the lessons tool. So you're building sort of a content structure where you go from an initial page that lists all of the weeks to a subpage that actually has content for one of those weeks. And this is going to be my week 1 learning objectives. Now you could title these pages any way you want. Something descriptive is always useful. A numbering system is also good. So if you go by weeks or if you go by classes and you have them numbered, that's usually nice because that gives each page its unique name. So if you have learning objectives for each week, they don't all just say learning objectives, but they say week 1 learning objectives. So I'm going to go ahead and click create. And note that I'm not checking either of these options here. I'm just leaving those two unchecked. Now when you create a new subpage in the Lessons tool takes you to that subpage. So again, you can see I went from course materials to week 1 learning objectives, and I'm getting this blank screen tips again. So if I was ready to start building my content, I could go in, I could just start building content on this page. Since this is a learning objectives page, maybe I'd go in and I'd add text and I'd add a bullet list or something like that of the learning objectives for that week. I could add various different pieces of content, and we'll cover some of those pieces of content in other videos. But right now I'm concerned with building my structure. So I'm going to continue building my structure instead of working on this page. So I'm going to go back to course materials, and now back on the main page of course materials I can see that in week 1 now I've got that week 1 learning objectives subpage, and you'll see that it's a clickable link, and this link basically just takes students to that subpage. So now I'm going to go ahead and do a few more subpages. Again, I'm clicking the plus, and I want to put it underneath where my learning objectives are, so I'm going to click the plus that appears underneath where that link is. And again, I'm going to do add subpage, and I'm going to do week 1 readings. And again, it's giving me a blank page, and you'll see that I went from the main course materials page to week 1 readings. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to start building a few more pages. Okay, now we've got all of our subpages for week 1, and at this point I could move on to week 2, or I could start building content in week 1. But just to show you a few things before we end the video, if I click on week 1 learning objectives, you'll notice that this is a blank page, but if I had content on this page, a student could come to the week 1 learning objectives, read the content, and then instead of having to go back to course materials like we've been doing before, you'll notice that they have a next button that appears at the top of the screen and a next button that appears at the bottom. And this is the easiest way for students when they're navigating through your course using this structure to move from page to page. So they don't have to go back to course materials to then go into the readings. They click next, and now I'm on the week 1's readings page. And again, this is a blank page, but if you had your content, they can now access all the readings. And now that I've got week 1 finished, I might go ahead and make this start closed. And if I go ahead and click save, you can see what that looks like. Now when I come to this page, week 1, instead of being open, just shows the week 1 title, and I open it to access and view the contents of week 1. So if you had all 15 weeks, you can see that that would be a pretty long page if all of those sections were open. But if all the sections are closed, so week 2 is closed and week 3 is closed, you have a relatively compact page, and students can just go and dip into the particular week that they're working on right then. And that's our demo video for building a collapsible structure in the Lessons tool. Thanks for watching.